Great. Well, welcome everyone. Today we have an exciting webinar about composting with our special guest, Mark King. So a little bit about Mark. He has worked in environmental protection and composting for more than 30 years. He began his career with the Maine Department of Environmental Protection and joined the Maine Compost team, which is a collaborative group that includes representatives from the Maine DEP, the Department of Agriculture, the State Planning Office, and the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. Mark was also one of the founders of the internationally recognized Maine Compost School and currently serves as its director. Today, he's one of Maine's leading experts on composting and food waste management and continues to support composting programs across the state. So, with that said, take it on, Mark.
All right, I appreciate it. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for having me. To get things started, we might as well look at the 30,000-foot view and talk about wasted food and why it's so important to us. First thing that we note is this is still a number that's been around since the early 2000s, but we estimate that the average Maine citizen or U.S. citizen wastes approximately 200 to 250 pounds of food annually, which means they spend about $3,000 on food they never eat. And the bigger issue is that when food is wasted, it wastes everything that went into producing it. The fertilizer, the pesticides, the compost that helped to amend the soil, the labor, the plowing, planting, harvesting, packaging, all the things that go into getting it to the supermarket, where then it's purchased and oftentimes just wasted because you either hang on to it too long or you forget you have it and it expires. So it's really kind of super important. And where Maine kind of looked at it hard was in 2011. We did a survey through the University of Maine, and they found about 43% of our waste stream is food that should be going to higher and better uses, which we'll talk about in a second. Uh, 2024, we actually wanted to get a handle on this, so we commissioned the food loss and waste generation study. We found that we have about 361,000 tons of food that is wasted annually. A great percentage of that is edible food. A lot of it is not edible, but can still be used for animal feed. So that's an important number that we're going to try to wrap our head around in the future going forward. And of course, we had a bill this last legislative session last year that put in a food ban that's going to start in 2030 for generators producing two tons or more a week will have to divert their food from disposal. And then 2 years later, we're going to drop to 1 ton a week. And eventually we'll get down to the residential level, provided that there's enough support for that. We found that, the major contributors were households accounting for about 36% of the total that's wasted, and then farms. And this kind of gave farms a black eye. It doesn't mean that they're wasting it as in disposal. What it means is that it never makes it to a consumer. And most farms, when they have spoils, they turn them into fertilizer by turning them under into the soil. So it's actually a really good thing that they have a little bit of waste that goes to keeping the crops alive and thriving. So we figure that we could recover 43,000 tons of edible surplus food annually, which is a conservative estimate of the 361. But that's kind of one of our goals, is to get that food to donation in other places. And then, of course, the greenhouse impact of this is it's the emissions of about 400,000 cars. People like to have comparative things. So in 2016, we developed this food recovery hierarchy. And the way it works, it's an upside down pyramid similar to the EPA. We start out with not producing waste in the first place, which is to reduce unwanted food. Then we want to donate edible food to hungry people, as we have number one in food insecurity in New England, and 1 in 6 children go to bed at night with no meal in their belly. So it's kind of a bad thing. And when we can't feed people, the next is stuff is still edible for animals, like pig feed, things like that. Then at that point, we want to drive it down to either composting or digestion. Ultimately, if none of that works, then disposal, which is either waste to energy or landfill, is in order. The two main options in Maine for utilizing food that can't be fed to people or animals is either composting it or anaerobic digestion. Both of these are assets to us. They're tools in the toolbox, as is feeding hungry people, feeding animals, and not producing waste in the first place. And ultimately, the disposal options we want to use for garbage because that's what they're meant for. So, composting is a process that transforms raw organic material through a microbial activity into a stable soil additive that benefits the soil by bringing health and vitality to the soil. Some of the benefits of community composting, it is low cost. It can be done on either small or large scale. As a matter of fact, if you start small, you make less mistakes, and then you can expand and expand as big as you want to get. It reduces the volume and the weight of trash. There are some landfills that actually will pre-compost the trash to try to reduce the volume a little bit. It keeps beneficial organics locally in the same zip code because if you produce a lot of food scraps and you ship them away, then your soil needs some sort of fertilizer or nutrient source. You don't have it. You have to buy it. Whereas if you compost locally, then those nutrients can be used in your soil. So keep them in the same zip code. There is a 40% reduction in initial volume, which is always good. It helps tie up any liquid nutrients into a complex soil particle, which is always good. And it also reduces odor and leachate of material, and you end up with a stable odorless material that saves communities dollars, which is always good. Some of the effects on climate change, I've been getting a lot of questions about that, so I put this together. It does reduce greenhouse gas emissions. A good compost pile, when it's smoking hot, produces carbon dioxide and water vapor, and that's it. Whereas if you let a pile of food sit in a pile and rot, it produces methane, nitrous oxide. Methane is 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide is almost 300 times more potent. And both of those are ozone depleters. So reducing the greenhouse gas emission, as I said, it enhances soil life. It also puts carbon into the soil and holds on to it. And carbon sequestration is one of the big things that we're all talking about these days. It supports sustainable agriculture by providing a soil additive that's natural and locally made, which is good. And the most important thing, it gets communities working together to build resilience. And that's really important. It was big in the 1800s, and it's even bigger and more important now because we're so diverse and so many things to do. We need to get together and start making stuff work. So, what does make a pile work? Well, the first thing is you have to have enough food and enough ability for the microbes to replicate themselves. So, we have what's called the seed-N ratio. Carbon is the energy source that microbes use, and nitrogen is the material that they use to build more microbes, to produce proteins and amino acids, all the things necessary to help them replicate. If the seed-N ratio is too high, basically what happens is the pile just slows right down and nothing happens. If it's too low, then what happens is we lose nitrogen either through ammonia gas or through leachate. And when you lose nitrogen through leachate, if it's left unabated, it can get into groundwater and cause all kinds of issues. So we like to try and keep that balance to about 20 to 30 to 1 in the recipe so we know it's going to get tied up. The next thing is we need oxygen. They need about 5% to thrive, and that's the same amount that we take in our bodies. When we breathe in air, it's 21% oxygen. When we exhale, out comes 16% oxygen. So good oxygen makes the pile efficient, low odors because it's working aerobically, which means no odors are produced. If there's low oxygen, you tend to get lots and lots of odors. And we call that anaerobic. And we'll talk about what those look like in a second. The other nice thing is the only tool you need to buy is a really good thermometer because it tells you how happy the pile is. Active composting is about 110 to 160. When the pile hits those numbers, I know I've got a lot of happy microbes because that means they're thriving, and the combined heat from their metabolism is what drives up the temperature. So that lets me know things are good. Here's a typical profile. This is day 0. I build the pile, and it takes about 24 to 48 hours for a pile to take off. And you'll notice that it starts here, it goes up to the mesophilic phase, which means it's about 100, 104, which is the same temperature that a digester operates at. The problem with that level is lots and lots of odors are produced because it's somewhat anaerobic. Once it kicks up and gets up to 130, 140, now we're talking about thermophilic, not a lot of odor, good hot temperatures, lots of active composting. That happens for about 6 weeks with turns in between to make sure all the material gets attached by the microbes to break it down. And then at the end of about 6 to 8 weeks, we go into a curing phase, which is where the pile may be turned once every couple of weeks. And the idea is that after about 3 to 6 months of curing, the material is good enough to go in a greenhouse. Moisture wise, we do what's called the squeeze test. We grab a handful of compost and we give it a good hard squeeze. If water comes shooting out, it's too wet. If I open my hand and it crumbles to the ground, it's too dry. And if I open my hand and I have a ball of moist material, it's perfect. And we call that 55%, which is the ideal. As far as particle size goes, on paper, when you have your feedstocks analyzed, feedstocks or whatever you put in the compost process, you'll get a carbon source that on paper looks like every other carbon source. It isn't until you get in person and touch it and feel it that you understand what it's going to do in the compost pile. This material over here is really, really fine. It's going to absorb liquid like crazy, but it's going to create a paste that's very hard for oxygen to penetrate. Over here, this is a pretty coarse wood chip. That's going to provide lots of pile structure and good airflow, but no surface area to absorb liquid. So that's not going to be helpful unless we need to add some structure and airflow to our pile. What's going to be the benefit is this material down here, which is a combination of coarse and fine particles. So we've got absorption, pile structure, and good airflow. So all the things that'll help us be successful. This is just an example of a microscopic piece of compost. This shows you where the microbes are working. You have your particle of food, you have your water film, and you have your airspace. Where all three come together, this area is where the microbes live. They live on the water film, they breathe the air, and they eat the particle. And the reason why we turn the piles periodically is because the microbes aren't mobile. They stay in one location and they eat all they can. When they run out of food, they need to have it mixed up so they can get some more. This is a pretty cool photo. This is a picture of a pile of hut compost with dead chickens in the middle. They died from a chicken farm. But what I want to show you is you notice these arrows, the piles breathe from the sides to the center and up through the top. Okay. So when you look at this center is really dark. It's dark and wet because that's where the really super hot active compost is happening. On the outside of the pile, you notice these little white areas here. That happened because the air rushed through so quickly that it dried that pile out and made it that light. So it shows you when a compost pile is vigorous, it's going to suck that air right through up to the chimney. So it's a really great example of a hot active pile. This is what I talked about. If your pile is totally happy, it's going to breathe in oxygen and kick out carbon dioxide and water vapor and a little bit of oxygen. That's what you hope for. If things are out of balance, then it starts producing funky odors and these things called volatile organic acids, which are very smelly and they're very dangerous in that they can cause lots of odor complaints. However, if you turn that pile after you start getting these problems, then the microbes will start eating those because they give them energy and it'll go back to thermophilic and the odors will go away. So oftentimes you can fix a pile just by giving it a turn. So here's some just common systems I wanted to share. This is the one I've been pushing throughout the state of Maine. I kind of kicked the earth machine to the curb because it just doesn't work. But this is just lobster trap wire. It's a 12-foot section rolled into a cylinder. It's 4 feet wide, so it stands 4 foot tall. This will aerate all over the place, and this will make excellent compost year round. When it's full, it holds 1 cubic yard, which is the minimum that you need to stay hot all winter long. And I have actually composted dogfish from a tournament in one of these, and in 6 weeks, they were all gone. So it is a really great compost unit. This is just some kids at Freiburg. using their scraps from the kitchen. And this is a more expensive system, but I often have communities where there are very wealthy people that don't like the looks of the lobster trap bin. They think it's gross. So they'd rather buy this more expensive system. But all it is three bins that are a cubic yard each. Same idea. We try to get as much aeration as possible. We fill this first bin when it's plumb full. We dump it into the second bin and we start to fill the first again. When the first is full, we flip the second to the third. So by the time you're done, it's had at least three good turns. So that'll make compost a little faster than the lobster trap bin, but it's a much more expensive undertaking. Then, of course, we can jump up to the next level, which is the Maryland bin system, which is a series of bins that are 10 by 10 by 10. And what you do is you put your material into them, let it sit for a couple of weeks, and then you turn to the second bin. And in most cases, there are three bins similar to that other system. So here's an example of one that we did in Biddeford. So each one of these bays is 10 by 10 by 10. And you can see that we laid a bed of horse manure down. In this case, back when they were doing marine mammals, we actually the mortalities that came from rearing and washing up on the beaches and things, we would put into the bed of this material. So dump these into here. Then we had grad students come and help us put the last layer on top and kind of rake stuff over. And then we finally ended up with this hot active compost that would sit for 2 weeks. Then we'd flip it to the second bin and then flip it to the third. And by the time it came out, so this would be 6 weeks, it was ready to go into use on site. Then we've got the simple static pile, which most transfer stations use. And that basically it's turned, once every 3, 4 months. And the idea is that it's a simple pile that you set it and kind of forget it till you have to give it a flip. But a lot of communities are starting to add food scraps as a way to get their organics out of their trash. And so now these piles are becoming more popular. So more and more transfer stations are looking to set these up. And so I've been working with MRRA to develop this Maine Master Community Composter class. And what this class entails is there are 5 webinars on how to compost. The last webinar is a series of demonstration videos. They're located on their website, which is mrra.net. And all these webinars are totally free to watch. When you're done watching them, if you wish to take an exam, you can reach out to Victor Horton and send him an email. He'll send you the exam. If you pass it with a 70%, you then may pay for a certification, a certificate of technical ability. What you get from that certificate of technical ability is number one, you can teach others. So it's a train the trainer program. But number two, if you wish to start a leaf and yard compost operation in your community or another community, you can do so and use that as your technical ability when applying for the DEP permit. They will accept it instead of having you prove you have technical ability. So it's kind of a cool program and hopefully it'll take off. This is an example of the Yarmouth transfer station. What I want you to notice is the ontogeny of compost. So here's a pile of fresh leaves. Look how big and fluffy that is. These leaves are about a year old. Notice how much smaller it is. This has been turned a couple times, but check this out. Now we're talking about 2-year-old material. It's already darker. We call this transformation gaining humus. You can see how light and fluffy it is, and it starts to get darker as you go towards the age and more turning. And what happens is as they turn, the microbes are converting those particles into humic and fulvic acids. And that's what gives compost its dark, rich color and makes it such a great soil additive. So Yarmouth is a really picture perfect example of what happens when you compost leaves. A turned windrow is a little bit more than a static pile. Instead of turning 4 times a year, you turn maybe once a week. And in most cases, we like you to turn based on time and temperature. The piles are limited in height, like leaves can get up to 10 feet tall. But when we're talking about a regular turned windrow, we want 3 to 6 feet max by 10 to 12 feet wide. And the idea is that when you turn it, you're rebuilding the porosity, you're adding oxygen, and you're helping to break down and remix the material. We do require temperature monitoring on some of these piles in order to make sure you do it right. Because as you get going, if you don't want to turn once a week, you can take your temperatures daily at the 1 foot and the 3 foot level. And whenever the average temperature of the 1 foot and the 3 foot is more than 20 degrees Fahrenheit different, then that means your pile is telling you it wants to be turned. And so that's something that we teach in that master community composter class. This is a really, really cool scenario. This is the Massabesic Middle School in Waterboro. They bring in fresh horse manure. This is their cafeteria. This is their garden. And the compost is located over here. And they take the food scraps and they take each day, they take a shovel and they dig a little trench in the windrow and they go around it. So in a course of 2 weeks, they go all the way around the windrow. And when they get back to where they first started, they turn it with the tractor. They do that for 6 weeks. And then this material goes into a curing pile and they start with a fresh pile. It works really great. This is the fresh horse manure and this is the finished compost. And what's really cool for schools is if you add this material to a 1 cubic foot bag and you go to the local farmer's market, you can sell that if you put a little sticker from your school for $5 a bag and there are 27 cubic feet in a yard. That means that you get $135 for a yard of compost you made. And it's great for schools to put money back into their field trips, buy programs for the kids, maybe take them to visit farms, whatever. It gives a little cash when schools are kind of strapped. This is just a shot of that finished compost before it goes into the curing pile. See how dark it is? That's that gaining humus. It's really quite cool. This is a turned windrow at Rainbow Valley Farm in Sydney. This is the finished compost. See how gorgeous that is? This is how he builds it. He starts out by putting a layer of sawdust on the ground. Then he adds his horse manure, his cow manure, and other wet material. Then he puts another layer of sawdust on top. And then he turns it with this windrow turning machine, which is basically like an ice fishing auger, the kind you drill a hole in the ice. Picture it on its side. As it spins, it kicks material up and then it flays out and creates this really nice parabolic shape you see here. So really cool device. So what do we do? How do we get started? Well, the first thing, I've produced 2 guides you can have for free. You can either reach out to my email down below, or if you just want to go on the DEP website and look up Guide to Recovery and Composting Organics in Maine or Composting, it'll take you to the page where I have both of these books. They're available. Anybody can use them. I've sent them all over the country, and it's just a really simple way to get started if you want to get started. Next thing you do is it going to be a municipality thing? Is it going to be a bunch of my businesses, or is it going to be residences? Each one has a different type of analysis. If it's residential, you can actually send them home with a survey form and they keep a track of what they buy versus what expires, and it gives an idea of how much waste that they produce. So you can figure out a system of either do I have buckets for them to collect in, or do I have a local area where they can all come and drop off. If it's a business, what we like to do is we like to perform what's we also call residual characterization, but we get in the business, we start at the end where they store everything, we look at the expiration dates, then we go to the kitchen and look at how things are prepped, then we go to the dining area and look at what things are discarded at the end of a meal, and then we go to the trash. And the idea is that we use that information to help that business figure out ways to shop a little smarter and ways to conserve what they want. And this will be the next program that I'm going to do with MRA, conducting a waste audit. So that'll hopefully be coming this fall, but it's going to be another program to help people figure out how to do that. So here we go. This is in actually this is the scrim line at the end when people drop off their trays, but we also have kitchen material too. So this is sort of the back end of the system. And then what can be collected? We're really kind of pulling back. I work a lot with Suzanne Lee from the University of Maine. We're pulling back from everything can go in to stay away from paper, stay away from compostables, because a lot of the compostables these days have PFAS or other contaminants. So what we're trying to say is let's stick with the things that come off someone's plate, including coffee grounds, meat and fish, eggshells, seafood, pasta bread, fruits and vegetables. If you've got a big system, dairy, fats, meats can be added, but we try to keep it. If it's a home scale, we try to keep away things that are going to break down and make odors that are going to attract animals. So really, honestly, we're just trying to get people to compost the food stuff itself. And then here's the kitchen. See all these Brussels sprouts and broccoli heads and things. The biggest trick here is getting off the stickers, the little stickers and the rubber bands, because those can mess up compost. But what they do is on the pre-consumer, they have a little area where they just shove stuff in, either a bucket or this little hole in the sink. This guy's cutting up some carrots. Post-consumer is what comes out after people are done dining. And the biggest issue there is contamination, the papers and the plastics, and someone forgets and leaves a fork in there. So it's really all about education. You've got to educate on the front end and educate on the back end. And then this is a big one too. When you tell staff of a restaurant, hey, by the way, we're now going to composting, you got to do all this extra stuff. They're going to be like, well, wait a minute, we're already super busy. So the way you do it is you produce it as a group team thing. We're going to do this together. It's going to be better for the environment. We're going to produce a really great compost. It's going to be a team effort. You start bringing them in that way instead of telling them they have to do it, and you'll find a lot more cooperation. So that's one of the things that we work on. And then if you're in a community, I love to see people start with a pilot. Start small, start slow, start easy. As they say in the military, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. What that means is you make less mistakes, so you make more progress, and you'll see success much quicker. Oops, apologize. And then you got to figure out which is the best. As I said, are you going to have containers located all around town, or are you going to do curbside pickup? It all depends on what you want to do. And then you need to figure out which are the ones that are going to be most successful. For example, University of Southern Maine, right in Portland, that's a great opportunity because they already have an idea of what they want to do, and they would be a great one to start a pilot project with. So, can be always good. I like to, if I'm working with residents, I like to send a survey and find out what they want, what would make them happy. Once you figure out what that survey feedback tells you, then that helps you better define and design your system. And then you launch it. And usually you tell people it's going to be a 6 month. We're going to gather the data, then we're going to come at you with a really great program. But we want you to tell us what you want. And if you do that, you're less apt to make mistakes, because the one thing you need to remember is success is not a straight line. Success has lots of bends and curves and dips, because nothing ever goes perfectly according to plan. If it does, it's not worth anything, because the things that are worth the most require the hardest work to get to. And that's just something that's the reality of life. And when you have a dip, you've got to learn how to bend and get it back into shape. So it's a great opportunity to figure out your resiliency as well. One of the ways that we can help is we have this waste diversion grant program. We've been quite successful with it. We've had it at DEP since 2018. It was part of the Maine State Planning Office, but when Governor LePage kind of dissolved them, those parts and parcels came to DEP. So it's a good thing. And we're looking, to help underserved areas, waste prevention programs. We've done a lot for Portland. We've done a lot for South Portland. So, big cities still can apply. We're just trying to find the best fit for the money for the highest value. They are competitive, but there are a lot of rounds where we get the same people because basically they've got new ideas and want to do different things. So we rank them based upon what they hope to achieve and the value of their project. And then in the end, we give out money till we run out. So it's a really simple system. And just to give you some statistics, since 2018, we've awarded almost $2 million. So, and you can see that the number of awards have grown over the years. And what's really interesting is that people see this organics blue bell as saying, "Oh, wow, That's really big. Is that because you run the organics program? And the answer is no. I actually did some analysis, and 80% of the projects that have come to us since 2018 have all been organics driven. So this is actually a really good balance. And we also love recycling. We love repair clinics. That's a really big thing where you get some retired folks together and they repair damaged equipment, bring it back to life. South Portland had the lending library where they had a whole bunch of electronic battery operated items. You could try it before you buy it. All those kind of ideas are really cool because it gets people to try something before they buy it and waste it. Say, this is what I wanted, and they toss it in the garbage. It gives us a chance to see stuff and try it out. So it's a really good thing. So what are the options once we collect our food scraps? The easiest is to compost at home, right? If everybody composted at home, believe it or not, that 361,000 would probably drop by, I'd like to guess a third anyways, if every single Mainer composted their food scraps at home. But that's just not going to happen. There are some that want to be hybrids. They want to compost at home in the summer and in the spring, but in the fall and winter when it's cold and wet and snow comes, they want to go somewhere. Or there are the diehards that want to compost year round, but they're becoming less and less these days. The other option is you compost on site at the transfer station, for example, or a restaurant compost right in their back 40, right? That's another option. But in most cases, it's offsite. And offsite requires transport. Transport requires two things: diligence and oftentimes money. Most people that go to the transfer station with their trash will easily bring food scraps to a compost pot. So those have been the most successful programs that I've been part of, is these transfer station kind of operations. However, we do also have a bunch of farms that have what are called compost management plans they get from the Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry, but I also help write those, where they don't need a DEP permit and they can compost up to 60 cubic yards of solid waste on farm. So that's another option. Finally, you can take it to the digester, and usually AgriCycle will come in and they'll drop off containers and you have a relationship with them. So, biggest key is get citizens involved. This is the Waterville Winslow AgriCycle site, and this lady was kind enough to let me take her photo, and she's super psyched. This is some options. You got garbage to garden. I know the Portland and South Portland have these guys, and they either do the buckets or they have container drop-offs. This is their container drop-off site. What I love about this group is the education. If you throw a diaper in there, you're the worst person on earth because of all the education you see there. And that's the key that makes it all thrive. If you wish to develop your own, I made the mistake. Actually, I call it the fortune, but it was a mistake of promoting this thing called consolidated collection, which is what they do with their drop-offs. I promoted it, got people excited about it, and they started putting them all over the state. Well, come to find out, in my department, they normally would require a transfer station license for every single one. Well, it was obvious the cat was out of the bag. The horses were ahead on the racetrack. So I had to do something. So I begged my boss to come up with a better option. And so she said, look we're not going to go around and tell people they got to get a transfer station license. So instead, we're going to require registration. So we know where they are. And if there's a problem, we can figure out what's going on. No cost, just send us a registration. So most of these facilities now are registered with the DEP. And if there's an odor complaint, we know who, what, where, when, and why. So to compost locally, you need a great site with really good, deep, well-drained soils. You need a good work surface. If you work on dirt or soil, you have to get it mixed into the compost, and it actually will kill the activity. So we like to have either compact gravel, asphalt, or concrete. And you have to have really good stormwater control, especially if you're near any water bodies. This is just a typical site. The way it runs is you come in here, you drop off your material in receiving and handling. I've got amendment to mix it. So this is your first chance to control odors because you receive wet, sloppy material, cover it with carbon, odors are gone. So that's a good thing. After you mix it well, you compost here. Then when you're done composting, you stockpile it here. I come in my truck, I drop off my compostables. On the way out, you fill me up with compost. Now my trucking is paying both ways. It's called a backhaul. So that's what I like to see. And then you process only what you can manage. If you overdo it, you end up with messes like this. So try to grow slow and make sure that as you're successful, you add a little bit more. This is the Farming to Compost site. I'm going to end with this. It's a project that we started in 2004. It was actually started with a state planning office grant, but we take food scraps from the University of Maine at Farmington and we mix them with horse manure from the racetrack. And the way that it works is we get the food scraps from the kitchen area, from the service area, and from the clean area. They're brought to the site either in pails or totes. The material used to be weighed, but we lost the scale, so now we don't weigh it. The material is dumped in a skid steer. The skid steer drives down to this big loaf of horse manure, digs a trench, and dumps it in. So I'll dump here on Monday, dump here on Wednesday, dump there on Friday. Then the following week, here on Monday, here on Wednesday, here on Friday. And then I turn the whole pile. We do that 3 consecutive times or 6 weeks of compost. Then that material goes into a pile for final curing. We have a sale 3 times a year, and we make on average about $2,000 a sale. And the end result is that this compost facility pays for itself. There is no cost to the town, no cost to the school, and it's 100% sustainable. So this is the model I'm trying to make statewide. So this is my final word on preventing wasted food. Encourage gleaning and share tables at school. Gleaning is where people come out to your vegetables after you've harvested what you want from market and they take what's left over. Promote backyard composting wherever I go. That's my go-to. Install public kiosk drop-off locations if you're going to compost locally or if you're going to work with an offsite place. If you go to this website here, is how do I do it? Basically, that talks about composting. Leaf compost programs can be expanded to accept food. We talked about that already. If you want anything, just look up Mark King compost and it all comes up. I've been around long enough that I've got quite a pedigree on the landfill on the website. And with that said, I think, yeah, I'm ready for questions and I can stop sharing too.
Well, thank you so much. That was so informative, especially
Sure.
for someone who is new to composting, as myself. If anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand or drop a question in the Q&A box. I can open up the questions. I have one. So, um, so if someone like me, or say someone who is still undecided about wanting to compost, what is like the most important thing you would want them to know before, like to make your pitch, I guess?
Okay. Well, if it's a homeowner,
It is a homeowner, yes.
okay. So if a homeowner wants to compost, the first thing that I ask them is where do they want to put it and where are their nearest neighbors? And one of the things that'll happen is I'll get a lot of folks that will want to put a bin closest to the woods because they don't want it to upset anybody on their property. Well, the problem with closest to the woods is if you haven't properly built it, it's going to produce odor, and that's where the wild animals are. So I try to make sure that they understand that here's what's going to happen if you do it right, and here's what's going to happen if you don't do it right. So the number one thing is location, location, location. The second thing is, are you going to do this year round or are you going to do this once in a while? Because if it's a once in a while thing, then I'm going to advocate they use more amendment, more carbon than less, because the biggest key is not producing odor. If they're going to do it on a regular basis, then I'll help them develop a specific recipe that doesn't waste carbon. So really the trick is I meet with each one individually or we'll hold a workshop at the community and people will ask their questions then.
Mm, That's a great point. Yeah. I was wondering, like how has composting in Maine changed since you first started working in the field?
Well, when I first started, there wasn't a lot of interest in it because I'll put you simply, disposal was cheap back then. And apathy it tends to be our worst enemy. If it doesn't cost a lot of money, it doesn't have a lot of interest sometimes. One of the things that has really helped composting, but it's been super controversial, is pay as you throw. Pay as you throw gets people thinking about what they're putting in their garbage bag, which is a really good thing. But some folks consider it an unfunded mandate that you're making me buy these bags and you're forcing me to pay more money. I'm already a taxpayer, but if you have the right discussion, and I usually do it with selectmen or councilmen, is that the way that you coach this is not that it's an extra cost. It's an opportunity to see how much good material you waste and find ways to get it to a more productive use. And when people start realizing how much they throw away that could still be reused, it's a bit embarrassing. And all of a sudden, the pay as you throw isn't so bad. It isn't such a bad pill to swallow. So,
Definitely. Troy has a question.
yes, sir.
Yes, thanks, Mark. Um, I was intrigued by the lobster trap, the lobster wire composting bin. I'm thinking about, say, someone, a resident in Portland who has a small backyard, has a garden that they, have garden scraps, and they also have some food scraps. How would you recommend that they load that up? Should they do it incrementally as they get material, or should they just kind of create it all at once?
Well, that's a really great question. So the thing that makes these lobster trap bins so successful is you've got to put a somewhat active carbon source in there. So like I like horse manure or goat manure or alpaca manure. And so I like to put about a 6 inch layer on the bottom of that. And then you just start adding your food scraps or whatever. And after you add some, you cover it with like a coffee can or a small pail full of the horse manure and you let it build. So incrementally is perfect. Now some people want to like get all their leaves and grass clippings together, and then in the winter they want to throw them in these bins and just let them set. So that also works. I'll say one thing about leaves. If you put leaves in with food all by themselves, they get wet, they compact, and they just don't work well. But if you mix leaves and grass and get them cooking and create like an active material, then you put it in the bin with your food scraps, you're going to have great compost. So that's the trick is active media inside the bin.
Well, is it important to make that like make it full all at once, or would it be okay if someone over the course of a month or so is adding things and getting it up to the top? Or
Yeah, yeah. And the thing you got to tell them is to be patient. They're not going to get hot temperatures if it's only a foot up.
right?
When it's about halfway full, they're going to start noticing the heat. So, yeah, as long as they're patient, if they're not patient and they want stuff to happen tomorrow, then build it all at once.
Hmm.
But they do work really well.
Cool. Great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions?
I have a
Um,
follow-up actually, Evan, if you don't mind.
okay.
So, thinking about if people are gardening and they, pull up some grass and weeds, should they try to chop those up into smaller pieces before they throw them in their home compost, or are they okay kind of in bigger size?
So, chopping it up is much better.
Mhm.
If you put in bigger size, it'll still work. So the outcome is what's important. Do you care to have compost that next year, or do you want it to take longer? One of my biggest banes is a lot of farmers will want to compost, but they want to compost hay. Hay in the long strands takes forever to break down, but if you chop it up, it actually composts quite quickly. So I talked to them about that, and some farmers are like, I don't care, I'll just build a pile and just when it's done, it's done. But others are like, oh, okay, I'll get a hay buster, and then it works great. So the problem with the hay is it's got that lignin coat, and that microbes can't get into it unless they go in through the ends. So when you chop it up, you create more ends.
And just actually, 'cause the manure question in some parts of the state, you probably have an easier time getting some of those really awesome, feedstocks like the manure. What would you recommend for someone who lives in a more urban environment to get that bottom layer? Could you get like composted cow manure at the garden center, or what type of thing would you recommend?
Well, if you're going to get anything, I'd buy the bedding that they use for guinea pigs,
Yeah.
the baled shavings.
Okay.
What you need is just an absorbent layer in the bottom. And the leaves aren't totally verboten, but if you can get grass clippings mixed in with them, now you've got carbon and nitrogen. Now,
Oh,
some
cool.
people don't have leaves and all they have is lawn. If
Mm,
you mow your grass, if you let it set out, if you rake it flat and let it set out for a couple days, all that chlorophyll goes off into the atmosphere and it turns from green to brown. And believe it or not, when you mix that brown grass with fresh grass clippings, you get heat.
mm.
So you can actually generate your own carbon source just by letting your grass dry out a little bit.
Oh, cool. That's a great tip.
Thank you so much. I have another question. Maybe there's no more, we can conclude this fantastic webinar. I have a question about the future of composting. So, what excites you the most about the future of composting in Maine specifically?
Well, I've been told that I need to prepare for the 2030 ban, and I'm still the only person in the organics program because we have a bunch of folks working on PFAS issues that when that PFAS program goes away, I'm going to have some more people to help me. But what I'm most excited about is building capacity. And that's why I'm doing these programs with MRRA, because if I can get a whole bunch of certified master Maine community composters, I now have more people that can help spread the word. And I can't be everywhere, although I do travel everywhere. My basically the whole state of Maine is my office. So I will go wherever I'm asked to go. But if I have 5 or 6 people in the county and it saves me a 4 hour trip, that's also a good thing. And so what I've tried to do in these webinars is create a good educational background for folks. And once they get certified, if they choose to do so, I've included a thumb drive that has all kinds of educational material, including a slide presentation they can give to their community that is a smaller version of this one, but it lets them get people to understand what composting is going to look like. And then it has surveys in there they can send to their residents. So it's a really great, it's like 13 different things on this thumb drive. And then you also get a 3 foot thermometer. So you can demonstrate temperature taking, which is one of the videos that we have on the site. And once again, it's mrra.net. And you look up Maine Master Community Composter. And once you get that certification packet, it gives you some confidence. We have a decal that goes on your vehicle that says certified Maine Master Community Composter. People, you get a little more swag in your walk when you have a bit of education, and now you're someone that people are going to look up to a little bit because you're now providing them knowledge they don't have. And so there are some people in the community, maybe some older folks that feel like, I've retired, I'm out of touch. And now they have the ability to provide some education and become relevant again. So my hope is that we get anybody under the sun that wants to do it. And I just hope that they do it because they want to teach others, because that would be great.
And getting people of all ages, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
really important. Oh, thank you so much. If there's no more questions, I think we can end the webinar. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Hope everyone learned something more about composting today.
All right, very cool. Thanks for having me, and you guys have a great day.
Bye.
Take care.